Check. Check.
If you want to mute, so green's on. If you
Oops. Check. Check.
Good afternoon. Welcome, even teams, to the afternoon session. We have a guest. I'll introduce him in a second. But first, before we get going, let's do some quick attendance.
Yay. Team 14. Awesome. Team 12.
Who's missing?
Yeah. Sorry, who's team 12? Who's missing from your team right now? Okay. Everybody else is here? Okay. Team 10? Cool. Team 8? Wait, sorry, team 8, raise your hands. Okay, I only see 4 hands. Okay. Team 6? Okay. Wait, who's missing from team 6? I only see 4. Hank is missing. Okay, team 4? All right. Team 2?
Team 2's a little scattered.
You're a little scattered. Okay.
Team 2, reform as Team 2. All right, we'll work through it. All right, this afternoon, very similar to interim, you'll be showing your worlds, beginning up. But before we get going with that, I want to introduce Arnab. Arnab's a guest. Actually, Arnab, you and I were the same graduating class, right? That's right. So digging back into the history, we won't mention the year we graduated, but just know it happened in the past. We're both ETC, same class.
I was very fortunate to have Dave as my TA for BVW, so
There you go.
That's something worth mentioning. But yeah, beyond that, it's very exciting to be here to see what you guys have in store today. Just a quick summary of what I do. I'm a product manager at Twilio. It's a company based in the San Francisco Bay Area. And prior to that, I spent a good 12, 15 years building games on many different platforms. Console games, social mobile games, educational video games. So yeah, that's a little bit about myself.
And you'll be joining us. And so as we present the worlds, we encourage you to invite us in as guests. It's not required, but we'll be gentle. And it's sort of a nice chance to practice the work of having guests in your world. But like I said, your choice. Take notes. Producers taking notes. Even though the worlds are done, we still ask you to record feedback. We're going to sort of like think of the feedback in the context of, if you had another week, what might you do? Where might you focus? One part of that makes it real is the class does build to the festival. And so there's a chance that you might want to present a round one world as a possibility for festival. You might, at that point, decide to like make a few changes, tweak things. So there is a little bit of reality to the feedback and thinking about iteration. The other thing we're doing, do we have the URL? This form is still live. So as you're watching the world, reflecting, if you want to contribute feedback to the current team, we encourage that as well. Just note it's the same form as last week. So when you go to retrieve the feedback, take note of the timestamps. The ones that are timestamped last week are from interim. The ones that are timestamped this week, today, are from today. So with that, I guess which team are we going with first?
Team 14.
Team 14. Come on up. And would you like a guest? Or, all right.
Really get off to the side.
Is that foreshadowing the space meeting?
Yeah, speaking of that, the people, we're going to start.
Oh, yeah.
This mark, looking forward. It's going to be. It should be the top one, the Kraken's Dirge. Once you get in there, long hold this. And we got a half.
All right. I'm ready for that. Do this.
Right.
Kraken's Dirge. How do we do this? Let's do it. All right.
Storm is getting worse.
We'll be fine.
You said that 2 hours ago, you know, right before I got shot.
Would you have preferred we stay on the ship? I didn't know how much my life swallowed me then.
We could have just taken the boat and left. You were the one that insisted on stealing that relic thing.
We were just supposed to leave with no money. Wouldn't make it a week before we were stuck doing the same crap or worse. You know that. So maybe it's our chance to finally get to it.
Is very.
Yeah, it just gives me a bad feeling.
That's just the blood loss talk. And the captain was hiding it because it's worth a ton. Just get some rest. We'll be rolling in on the mainland in no time.
What was that?
I don't know.
Captain catch up?
No. Oh, God.
It's letting water in. Get something to hit it with. The hammer! On the table! Damn it. Stupid wound. Can't get up. You're on your own.
I'll handle it.
Hammer those planks over the break. Take the bucket and start bailing. It's coming back around. What could it want? It's not like we got any cargo.
Not really got the time to question right now. Oh God, 3 at once.
It wants the relic.
What?
I think it wants the relic.
Why?
I have no goddamn idea, but it's the only weird ass thing on this ship.
Sure.
No, but 100 years on the jack shit you've come up with.
We can't just get rid of it.
Sure as hell can.
But I think might be a whole opportunity to make something of ourselves. To have a life. Like we always talked about. You wanna give that up over a guess?
We ain't going to be doing any living if that monster takes us to the depths.
I can fight it off. This tentacle freak has to give up at some point.
Yeah, we'll definitely fight off something twice the size of a ship with a hammer. Get a hold of yourself, man. Throw it out the window. Now!
Fine. This better damn work. Take it back, you bastard!
I think it's over.
Guess you were right. I've certainly gotten us in a swell spot. No job, no money.
If we survive that, I think we'll be fine with whatever crap we have to deal with next.
You're right. Well then, first thing first, let's get to shore and celebrate being alive over some octopus.
All right. I would say, like, just going through that, a really great world for being in a place. Just a really good use of like large sort of room scale space. A little nervous about getting. Clearly, I knew I was near stuff, but the size and the scope of the room felt really good. Now that said, there was a lantern just swinging into my head, kind of a lot. But overall, the space was really nice. And I think the core of this, of creating a well-designed, well-crafted space, was a really great thing to be working from. The intro, lost me a little bit. I think there's a lot of reliance on voiceover, and like I wasn't really catching it, and so I wasn't too sure exactly what was going on. But all that said, I didn't really need it too much. Like there's sort of like world building and story and characters that are happening. At the end of the day, like there is a tentacle coming into the room and I got to do something about that. There's water coming in, I have to do something about that. There's holes, I have to do something about that. So like the story of I'm in a boat and bad things are happening was absolutely present and drove a lot of what I was doing. And it was working really well. Like the grabbing the hammer and hitting the tentacle for the first time and like the sound effect and the reaction, like it's a weird thing in VR, sort of thinking about the feedback and the haptics. Like there is no tentacle there. I'm not holding a hammer, but the combination of like the tentacle reacting and the sound, there is like your brain is a little bit fooled in thinking you are hitting something physical. So it was a really sort of nice, satisfying part of this. And the progression of this, the fact that I had 3 things to work with, and there was sort of like an ongoing escalation of this meant for a pretty decent interest curve. Like I was like in this, I'm like dealing with a tentacle, there's water, there's boards, and like the 3 tentacles coming out and sort of like that sense that it's getting worse. I was, I think, balancing between the world presenting these problems and sort of having confidence in those problems and dealing with sort of like the fiddliness of the interfaces, like grabbing the hammer, holding it. The boards were the thing I had the least confidence in. It's kind of an ambitious thing. Like, can you do virtual carpentry under these conditions, these kind of constraints? And for the most part, it felt like it was working, but sort of comparing it to the water and to the tentacle, there wasn't as much feedback. So like the tentacle, I've got a hammer and I hit it, there's a sound effect, the tentacle changes color, it stops squirming, and I know really clearly what's happening. The water, I was able to sort of like, I felt like I was scooping, I saw water in the bucket, and the water level seemed to go down. And so I had that feedback. The planking, like putting boards in the hole, there was less feedback on Do I leave it there and then get nails? So like it's a much more complicated action. So if we're thinking about like the actions that the guest is doing, scooping water, bucket, scoop, hitting a tentacle with a hammer, like really straightforward. Fixing a hole in a pirate ship is like, we're now talking like a trade that takes years to master. And so like reducing that to a simple interaction is a bit more of a challenge. So it's sort of understandable that it's a harder interaction. But overall, the actions felt really good. The space felt good. And the fundamental idea is a super strong one. Like being attacked by a kraken and having to deal with these consequences. If I were to iterate this, I think it's just kind of a lot of refinement. The kraken having even more of a presence. Like I kind of want the whole boat to shake. I kind of want like the idea of the stakes to be increased. I kind of want it to feel more like a threat. This world is a little bit more like I have problems to solve and I'm going to solve them. And like it's the story of a kraken attacking. I get it, but I don't feel it as much just yet. And the one in that I felt the least was probably the water. The sense that we're sinking. And I don't know if that was just because every time I saw water, I grabbed a bucket and I just like bailed it out, and I was like, I'm on top of that. But overall, like I thought all the choices in terms of like what I do, why I do it, and how it fits in the world were working really well. I just sort of want them now like amplified. Like the kraken screams and like the space shakes. Like when I hit the tentacles, there's more of a reaction. The water coming in, just sort of like using all the tools to like make those moments really feel as dangerous as the world says they are. I did like I was sort of hearing, I think I had challenges like hearing the voiceover, but the discussion at the end about what did you call it? The thing on the table that the kraken went, the relic? I like the discussion going on. Like it resonated with me, like as I just went through this. Like there is no way we should keep that. And it's an interesting thing to think about is the guest and like where I am in the story. I have no attachment to this relic, right? It's just there on the table. But I have a lot of attachment to the kraken and the flooding and the holes in the boat because I'm dealing with those. And so I felt the other character was being very irrational and wanting to hold on to the relic because the problem, as I saw it, wasn't how do we get the relic home? The problem was how do we get rid of the kraken so we don't die? And I might think about, are there ways to, if you really want the guest to feel some tension, are there ways to give them some context and ownership over the relic such that it being present and it being part of what is motivating me is more in what I do, as opposed to it's just sort of something told to me in the space. But it's a nice sort of escalation then of the interactions where I use the relic and sort of throw it out to sort of solve that whole thing. A quick question. There is a character in a bed in this whole space who's got like bandages over his eyes. My brain was always wondering what's going on with that. Was that something? Did I miss something in the story?
It's in the opening
Okay.
When you stole the relic, you got shot. So it's better.
Okay. I think some of the world is, you have a very ambitious world, and some of the storytelling wasn't quite connecting for me, but the fundamentals of it were working really well. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, no, I think I'd say the only thing to add, having seen a BVW world after so many years, is that the amount of time you were busy doing things was a comprehensive time frame. Like it didn't feel like it was too little or too much.
Oh yeah, and I totally agree. Like the pacing of this felt really good. Like I had enough time to get invested, and there was enough time to like, when we got to the ending, to feel like, yeah, no, it's kind of time for us to wrap this up and like have a conclusion. I really like that. It felt like a good scope. Cool. All right. Thank you very much, team.
Team 12.
Oh, he is still afraid of you. How about giving him a meal to show you are a good person? Oops, you are scaring him. Take care to pat him gently, or he'll get scared of you again.
Right. A very different vibe from the last world. Going from the world of pirate ships stealing relics and being attacked by Kraken to going into the animal shelter to adopt a cat. But no less dramatic, I would say, in terms of like the stakes and what's going on. And a thing I really love, I love the vibe of this world. The music is like puts us in this space where it's sort of a simple, fun sound, and like the world is like setting up that it's not life and death, but it is about working with a cat and like having trying to get to like this happy thing. I think the world knows this stuff really well, and I appreciate that. And like the intro of like the simple drawings do a great job of establishing things. One thing that we're always like for watching and listening for is like crowd reaction. And like this world is nice and has those moments. Like the first time the cat jumps away, like pouring the cat food into the bowl. There's like a lot of little things where it's like, oh, like it's. And like when you get reactions, like that the audience like is there with you in the world. So like we understand what's going on, we understand why things are happening, and especially in those moments, and we're surprised when what we expect didn't happen or something new happens. So I think a lot of really good world building and like setting up a very clear problem. We want to adopt a cat, and the cat is like cautious about all of that. Like watching it. Like my brain was sort of like some questions, like there's a meter above the cat, and I know from a video game perspective, like kind of what this is. I know it's probably a meter that tells us like how like basically, I guess our relationship with the cat, like is the cat afraid of us or not? But it's definitely like, even though I know that, it's a little hard for me to sort of watch it and know how to use that. And like it's a question of like the world and like the feedback of what does it mean when I do this? And actually, that question got answered really well in a moment when I think you're petting the cat and like green hearts started coming out. And like all of a sudden, like it went from, oh, there's a meter to, oh, when I do this, state changes, like the cat gets happier. And I was sort of looking for a little bit more of that, like to understand what are the things I'm doing and how does that react? And it's an interesting design problem for like interactive experiences in games. Is like, I know it's not reality. So I'm kind of looking as a guest in this. I'm looking for the rules of the world. And you guys are playing in an interesting space because in some sense you're trying to work with the real rules of the world. Like how would a cat behave? And so your goal is to get the guest doing things as though it's a real cat. At the same time, I know it's not a real cat, so I can't just use anything that I would use for a real cat. There's a good chance you're not doing audio detection, so I'm not going to make noises at the cat. I'm probably not going to gesture at the cat. So I'm looking for, okay, within this reality, what are the tools that I have here? And it would be a thing like there was like petting. It seems like proximity is a thing. Like if I get too close, the cat gets scared. The food was a really lovely, clear thing. I think there was a reaction in the audience of like, wow, pouring the food into a bowl looks really good. And it sort of like speaks to just like getting that clarity of these interactions. Like the food going to the bowl was a nice, clear moment. The cat was attracted to it. And so that was the thing I was sort of watching for and wondering, like, what are these moments? But overall, like I said, the core idea of the world was really solid. And we got to a satisfying ending. Like it was that moment of like the cat coming over. It did seem like there was a surprise. Like near the end, the cat was mostly friendly, but then it jumped away from us again. And it made me wonder, like, so how does the cat work? Is there this layer of cat mystery here? Or is there a system of rules that I could sort of start to understand? Is there like sort of like hidden thresholds in here? Like if I get too close, the cat will run away? I'm just kind of curious, like, what is the behavior of the cat for real as you programmed it?
Initially, that's the case. I think that you go into a range that's too close.
Here.
Yeah, so at the beginning, when you approach the cat and to a close range, it's gonna just flee. And then after it like finishes eating, it should not flee anymore. And then the last animation should be just like when you're petting it too fast, it also like moves to another spot.
Okay. And I think that's where if I like focus on iteration, like how do you make some of those thresholds clear? Because in some sense, if you're programming this, you got to put in something that says like, if you're in this state or you're doing this, then the cat's okay. If not, the cat like moves away or something like that. And like for the guest now, the guest has to sort of like understand those shifts. I think that was the thing that was a little unclear is the idea of petting the cat like the wrong way, which actually is a lovely idea. Like you've gotten this far, and like the cat's accepted you, and then you make this one fatal error that you do this wrong thing, which is feels like a very cat thing to have happen. And the goal I think would be in that moment the guest understands. The guest is surprised. It's like I'm doing this thing, I'm there, and then all of a sudden like the cat reacts. I think the truth of that reality is you would probably be a little confused. And I think that's the game you're sort of playing in this world is there's some mystery to this. And how do you preserve some of the mystery, but also achieve like clarity as the guest learns these things? I sort of love that challenge. That's where I sort of like focus some of the iteration in this. But watching it, it felt really good.
A couple of things to mention is when you start out on the entrance, you had like a little legend for what the controls were. That's a really good thing to have because you cannot assume folks know what they would do if they were to get into the world. So I thought that was helpful even though I was viewing it. The 2D style intro that you did that then like led into the immersive world was done really seamlessly. Like the art was consistent. Like there wasn't like it didn't feel janky. It felt like one led to the other. So that was great too. The application approved part at the end, in the lead up to the world, it wasn't clear to me what the possible outcomes were for the adoption scenario. And I think to Dave's point, that's where you can, have many different alternatives, including something that would be, dark or comedic even, where it doesn't result in a approved application.
Yeah, there is a bad ending.
Yeah. So So yeah, so those are the things that were triggering my mind when I saw the full experience.
Yeah, and I would wonder, is there a way to translate the idea of the meter into something that connects with that idea of success? And it's a little bit of like, what do you want the guest to think of when they see this state? Like, oh, I'm looking at the cat, and I recognize I'm about halfway done. And in a like mechanical sense, halfway might be the truth of it, but if I'm like really in this fantasy, in this world, how do you want me to think? Do you want me to think like, I've got some of its trust, but I need to do this? Or like, I just need to like unlock this last thing, or like it's doing this for me. It's like it's willing to eat, and it's willing to let me get close, but it won't let me pet it yet. And a lot of times when we, as humans, experience things, we don't experience like things at 50% and like 75%. We experience more discrete moments. And I might wonder, like, could you find an idea of moments that lead to success in this? And like, to a large degree, you have those. Like, you have like feeding and petting and things like that, and the toy and playing with it. And I would just like iterate so that I can sort of understand those as moments, but also as progress. But a lot of great choices. Like, I love the scope of this. The cat is like just enough to like evoke cat and like those moments of emotion. And it's like, it's tough. Like, you've got 2 weeks, and potentially this cat could be, a year-long animation project to like bring it to life. So how do you make those choices of like, what is enough to give it personality? I think that's one of the challenging things in all these worlds is, it's not that this world is hard to figure out what would make it good. I think everybody making worlds knows how to make it better. The challenge is, how do you make it better in just 1 more week? How do you fit this into the time frame? And I think you guys made a lot of smart choices to keep this in a nice scope space. And I love the use of the space too. It's like, we're in a room with the cat. And I think that maps really well to the VR. Overall, a lot of great choices. So good work.
Thank you.
Team 10.
Luca, can you lights turn on? Who's playing your experience? Dream Guardian, right? Yeah. Okay. Like I was saying, I'm not. All right. How about now? Cool. Okay, do you guys have to hit start for your game? Yeah. Yes? Okay, then we'll just go ahead.
Hello, little teddy bear. Yes, you. I am the god of dreams, and I protect children from their nightmares. Tonight, I have a mission for you. You will become the dream guardian of the little boy, Bobby. Keep the nightmares away from him. But remember, nightmares can affect you too. Good luck, and good night.
Sleep well, honey. Have a good night. Good night, mommy.
This is a magic flashlight. Where the light shines, you can see nightmares from the dream dimension. Use the dream catcher to catch the nightmare. Now try throwing it instead. Use the flash to make the dream catcher fly back. Use the flashlight to make the dream catcher fly back.
Yeah, so you use the flashlight, using this finger to like turn it on, and then you point around to see. You use the dream catcher to, you can either smack something as they come at you, or you can throw it at the storm clouds to destroy it, and to get it back to you. You gotta point the flashlight at the dream catcher to bring it back to you. Okay. That's a lot. So, we got it. Yeah. All right. Let's do it.
Hello, little teddy bear. Yes, you. I am the god of dreams, and I protect children from their nightmares. Tonight, I have a mission for you. You will become the dream guardian of the little boy, Bobby. Keep the nightmares away from him. But remember, nightmares can affect you too. Good luck, and good night.
Sleep well, honey.
This is a magic flashlight. Where the light shines, you can see nightmares from the dream dimension. Use the dream catcher to catch the nightmare. Now try throwing it instead. Use the flashlight to make the dream catcher. Use the flashlight to make the dream catcher fly back.
Is there anything we're getting to? Yes. Boss fight. What do you want to speed run it? Right. We'll speed run to the boss. Pressure's on.
Hello, little teddy bear. Yes, you. I am the god of dreams, and I protect children from their nightmares. Tonight, I have a mission for you. You will become the dream guardian of the little boy, Bobby. Keep the nightmares away from him. But remember, nightmares can affect you too. Good luck, and good night.
Sleep well, honey. Have a good night.
This is a magic flashlight. Where the light shines, you can see nightmares from the dream dimension. Use the dream catcher to catch the nightmare. Now try throwing it instead. Use the flashlight to make the dream catcher fly back.
All right. Yeah, so let's chat about this. I guess Arnav, first, how was it to be in there? Like, what?
Yeah, I was gonna say like don't let my. Can you guys hear me? I'm gonna try this one. I was gonna say don't let my inability to operate in your world like be all of the commentary for it. It was extremely immersive, like very colorful. Like the artwork for 2 weeks seems like an amazing job. As a naive guest in the experience, when I first saw the items, I actually forgot about all the words that were instructions, because in my head I was like, oh, there's some sort of inventory, some kind of puzzle I'm supposed to like put together. So that's something that I legitimately had to get past through your help in suggestions. I was looking back, just trying to see if there was any interaction I was supposed to have with the character. But then I think that one of the TAs had clarified that you don't have to move. So I was like, okay, I just have to look forward. What else? I think the transition of the Dreamcatcher to, taking the whatever the character is to the nice fluffy poof was great. It was a very juicy interaction. I have a Dreamcatcher in my room, and it's super delicate. So for me personally, trying to throw the Dreamcatcher and get it back was not intuitive. But I get that it fit the context of what you were trying to do in the room. What else? I think with the flashlight, like I was just not like familiar enough with the controls to get to it immediately. If there was some way, like maybe if the introduction had me going through the different states of what each tool allowed me to do, I would have felt much more confident in getting to the boss fight. Those are like additional thoughts.
Well, and I was supposed to say, like, man, so much of this world is working really, really well. I mean, like, you know this world really well. I get the sense that as a team, you have a good sense of the story, the space, and the fiction. I mean, like you mentioned, Arnab, like one of the defining moments is not just the defeating the nightmares, but they transition into something warm and friendly, and like that tells a lot of the story. Like, it's not just we defeat the nightmares, we're making them friendly, and like, so just through the actions, I think you're getting a lot of this fantasy of us being a defender and us helping against this, I mean, true onslaught of nightmares. The visuals are really lovely. The room looks really great. I love how you're sort of like tying in the idea of the dream catchers into the posters. And like, there's a sense, I mean, although some of the posters, like this young boy has an obsession with, like, it seems like monsters and dream catchers. But I like that you're telling the story through all parts of this, like the sound effects of like the transition for these things. The intro was really, really nice. That is like this warm, glowing lights, who's like the you know, it's a really simple, short introduction, but it helps us just know quickly and clearly that our job is to defeat the nightmares. And there's a big reality with VR, which is you put a VR headset on someone, and all of a sudden, like, you can tell them a ton of things, and they'll like remember one thing, and then they'll get distracted and forget that. And the place I would focus on, like, iteration is, how do you teach a guest about this world? Because you've got some really familiar things. Like, you've got a flashlight, and like that dream catcher, like, it's a little bit weird, but I can sort of get it. But then, like you say, we're not just going to stop there. Like the flashlight, can you drop it? You have to pick it up. Yeah, well, I guess so. You can let go of the things, you can throw them, and you can turn the flashlight on and off. And so there's a lot of like complexity to the controls, which is great when I know it, but like learning that is a bit of a challenge. I mean, for round one, like learning this stuff isn't really the design goal of the assignment, but just watching what you've built, like thinking now about, okay, how would you bring a guest in? I really love, like I said, the visuals. The nightmares look different. They look scary. They read really well. Man, the lightning and the clouds, like there's a lot of intensity. And then the boss fight, like, is a really, really strong escalation for your interest curve. Like right before the boss fight, we're sort of in a place where the interest curve is flattening out. Like the nightmares, we understand them. We're now getting to a place where it's repetitive. But the boss fight brings that change that really, really helps get the world to a new place. And like that skull is going around, and then like the waves of enemies. And it's a really nice thing to see in a world. The boss fight doesn't look like it's all that difficult. It looks like it's a lot of the simple enemies coming at me, which in reality for this world, like the hardest enemies are like the clouds that you have to throw things at. They're hard to find, hard to see. So the boss fight represents a really nice balance of high intensity, but in truth, like probably like a relatively easy experience relative to how it feels, which when we're looking at an experience you possibly play only once is a lovely thing to find, where you can make the guest feel like they're doing something difficult, but in reality, it's not that hard. And I think in contrast, the clouds look like they should be easy, but are possibly harder in execution. And like that would be a thing, like figure out, like in tuning this, how do you make the guest sort of feel appropriately challenged, and then within that, how do you make them feel powerful and good at this when you want them to?
And just actually based on some of the discussions that are happening, I'll just talk. I'm a left-hander.
Ooh.
That's the like,
yeah.
it's for me to throw something with this hand. And so it was just like a lot of like trying to figure out how am I gonna throw and release something with this hand that I don't normally do it. So that's a great example.
Yeah, actually we can use both hands to.
Yeah. But by default the flashlight was on, so yeah, it's a great design challenge, right?
But yeah, I think a lot of really strong choices. The things, if I were, like I said, iterate, I would think about the interest curve. Like, how do you get the sense of progress and success to sort of build, like the boss fight's a great example. And I think, like, is there a middle thing? I think the clouds coming in are kind of that. One thing that I would look for is the boss fight brings a music change, I believe. And I would look for like a similar thing like in the middle. Like, is there a way to have the beginning feel like the beginning? Then there's a middle point where it's sort of like the intensity's gone up, and then the boss fight comes in. And I think to that end, the ending, like we defeat the boss, and like the sun comes out, but we don't quite resolve with the little boy. And I think if you had more time, I could see bringing some like conclusion to that. Of like, how do you sort of like complete this story and bring it all together? That said, the boy is present. Like you can, especially when he gets hurt, you can hear him. But this is always the challenge whenever you, like, anytime you do a lead or defend thing where the threat's in front of you and the thing you're defending is behind you, you just don't get a chance to look at that character very often. And so it was actually really good choices. He's in bed. You can't really see him much, but you know he's there. He sort of animates, and he makes noises when he gets hurt. But it would be a question of how do you make his presence just more there. And the last thing I was wondering about is the opening dialogue talks about the nightmares can hurt me, but it was really hard to tell that. I'm guessing that. So when you were playing it, was there a way to know that they were impacting you?
It either felt like something got blurry or it was in slow motion, but maybe it was.
Actually,
either.
we cancel that. No. If the nightmares attack you, your dream catcher will shrink.
Okay. Yeah.
But we didn't add a voice or tutorial to tell you that.
Well, and it's just, this is like when you're building things in the iteration on the feedback, the missing piece of feedback is the nightmares are hurting you, and you've made a difficult design choice, which is the nightmares are invisible sometimes. And like I think it makes the world feel a lot more exciting. Like you need to use the flashlight to see the nightmares. But now, like there's moments where they're attacking and you can hear the problems they're causing, but the world looks boring, right? If you turn the flashlight off, you'll get all this audio of things happening, and the world's like nothing's going on, which is, I think, a really great world-building idea, right? The nightmares are invisible. They're causing real problems, but until you turn the light on, you can't see them. But it does have this other side effect, which is it's hard to show that feedback if you're in that state. And I would wonder, how do you show that the guest is getting hurt, all this stuff? One last little note, I love, the guest has teddy bear hands. It's just a great way to continue the story. Like you are bringing my character to life. I think you mentioned at the beginning, you sort of addressed the guest as teddy bear or something like that. But from then on, like it's a little bit like lost, but it doesn't matter. Like, but you just have that little bit of story, you tell it, and it's really great. But overall, like super good choices, really strong world. Good work, team.
Team 8.
Do you guys want a guess, or are you gonna have?
I think we're gonna do it.
All right.
We want to get to the end.
There's some difficult ones again. Yeah. I can do it.
He can play it.
All right. Can we play it after you lose?
Yeah. Do you want to solve it? I think this is now a personal challenge. Like, you guys, the world is too difficult. I feel like I'm being set up to fail quite spectacularly.
I could never clear the game.
Yeah.
Remember, don't throw away your face.
Don't throw away my face. I often get told that advice. Hold on to my face. All right, there's a big start button over here, a big exit button here. I'm guessing we want to start. Whoa.
Oh, thank God you actually showed up. Excuse the mess. Things have been rough for me recently. It seems like everyone thinks that I'm crazy. Like, I have been seeing things. The things, them, they show up all the time now. Here they come again. Please, please stay. I can explain after. Quick, take this. There's a piece of paper on my desk. Grab it. That should hold them off for a second. I don't know how it works, but these seals seem to keep them away for longer. We'll need more to complete the spell. Oh, thank God you actually showed up. Excuse the mess. Things have been rough for me recently. Seems like everyone thinks that I'm crazy. Like, I have been seeing things. The things, them, they show up all the time now. Here they come again. Please stay. I can explain after. Quick, take this. There's a piece of paper on my desk. Grab it. Give that to me. That should hold them off for a second. I don't know how it works, but these seals seem to keep them away for longer. We'll need more to complete the spell. They should be somewhere in my room. I don't know where I put them.
All right. I mean, in some sense, a really good follow-up to the previous world. You're in some sense, very similar ideas. We have a character who's afraid of nightmares, who's being attacked by nightmares you can only see with a certain device, and you have to defeat them using this like way to make it visible. Very, very, very different takes on that idea. And I mean, I think like that's the starting point for this. Like, you guys have an aesthetic, a sense of this world that is really strong. Like, it's nice and creepy. Like, you've got this, working with this sense of these sort of spirits that have this really like pushing the edges of monster and like slightly familiar with like broken human features, like having that like is a really creepy aesthetic. So you went there and you make it work. And then like the tension of the world, I think, is working really well with that. Like, it is like, we sort of talk about choices. The monsters, like, you only really have one type, but it's okay. Like, we're not really looking. This world isn't about like variety and having them, show off like how this escalates. This is a world about this like consistent creeping, this consistent pressure, this need to like worry about these, because if they get too close, we just know something bad is going to happen. So it's a lot less about, like really straightforward consequences and, oh yeah, this happens. It's more like, I don't want to find out what happens if they get too close. And so there's a lot of sort of anticipation in this world that I think sets up the mood really well. Man, like, you are playing with a difficult mechanic. So the idea of playing with the face, like, is a hard thing to do, because fundamentally in VR, the headset is in the way. And I think if we are looking at this and trying to bring just naive guests into this, like guests who don't know the world, that is probably one of your biggest obstacles, is how do you explain and make that mask interface usable? It is like your hand, like, you have something in your face. I think part of the challenge is the world lacks some feedback. So there isn't a lot of feedback on the mask is on and off. You can see the state change in the world, but there's no like interface feedback for, oh, this is where I grabbed to put the mask. There's no like clicking in place. There's no that. It's a very like, it works, but the next level of iteration would be, how do you make it usable? And I think to that end, like, you do have like some UI on the screen. It's like, how many seals have you done? I think it would be sort of another clear place for iteration. Like, how do you make this sense of progress go beyond just a number, and it's part of the world? And I think that's a question I have for the world is, it seems like there's these 3 seals we need to get. And in the play of the world, she sort of says like, oh, this will hold them off for a little bit. But the story of the world is like, once we get all 3, there's a big state change. Like, the world has ended. And I would kind of wonder from a story perspective how to connect that a little better, because they sort of feel like just power-ups that help like defer the onslaught, when in reality they are the solution to the problem. So there's a little bit of like, oh, I need all 3 of them. Once all 3 of them are together, then this can happen. And I think that's a little, from a story perspective, I was a little like, I know the threat. Like, there's no doubt in my mind like that there's an immediate threat, but the ending is, beyond like the ambiguity of like the end scene of like my eyes are missing and stuff like that. But just what does success mean would be a thing I look at. That said, like the escalation of getting the seals and that forcing this balance between the steady march of these monsters and this thing I need to do, and just feeling that attention that I need to both pay attention to that, but do this other thing and split is a really good use of the space and interactivity. Like, it's the guest's attention as you sort of get more into interaction design is a very important thing to think about. In this world, I think you guys do a good job of like making that the center point. And watching it and playing it, like, I felt the need to look. I felt the need to like check in on things and balance that, and it creates a very overwhelming sense. And for a world that's about sort of a horror aspect, being overwhelmed and nervous works really well. There's times where you want the world to be fun and light, and being overwhelmed is less what you want. You want someone to feel powerful. But this world, I think you were hitting that really well. And so, yeah, like a lot of solid choices. The world, I think, really successful on that feeling. And you could sort of, the audience reaction was there. Like, I think the animation on the monsters didn't really seem textured. It was hard to tell. But like there's room to make them more detailed, but especially just the look of them, like the aesthetic and like their silhouette especially, like the animation's relatively simple, but it's all of it is enough. And I think that's a thing to like think about is getting a world to enough. And you think you made a lot of good choices to get it there. And like I said, the moving some of the usability so that you could, instead of having to bring in a team member, and obviously like round one is totally fine, but that would be where I'd focus is how do you make this world welcoming to a guest, not so much in content, but just in how do you get someone who has no idea what's going on to jump in and get all the way through, hitting all the emotions you want them to hit.
Yeah, I mean, my only comment was I would have had the same issue I would have had with the previous world. It seemed like there was a lot of complex like mechanics that were taking place with trade-offs. So yeah, just for that naive guest, like assume that you're gonna put this out there for someone who like has never experienced it. And I think the other idea that I'm getting now that I looked at this is like it'd be really interesting to see if you set aside some time just for open exploration before the march of the centaur zombies starts to come at you, just as a way for, you know, folks who may not be as quickly, who may not be able to as quickly get into all of the action, they get a chance to like get comfortable. So that's kind of a
Good work, team.
Team 6.
Do you guys want a guest
Attention all. Recycling process is about to begin. Please evacuate from the disposal center immediately.
All right, let's get the headset off. Yeah, right from the beginning, one of the things that I love about this is the space you made, and the room, the space is nice. Both it's contained but feels big enough. Like it feels like a thing. It's a factory that things are happening in. You've got these signs up. You've got other robots. You've got this big menacing fire, and then there's like looks like the overseer robot. I don't know, like he looks over by there, like he looks in charge but scary. And you have this soundscape, like the room has audio to it that brings it to life as well. And so the starting point of this is like you've got a world that feels believable. And I like to add to that, you put your hands in the air and you've got robot arms. And so like you've doing a really good job of world building, of making a space, thinking about what the backstory is and how to like bring that to life and what choices in that. And then we get to the little robot guy on the conveyor belt. And there's an impressive amount of character going on here. He's not like super complicated, but there's a lot of like personality. Like he's wiggling. He's got a squeaky little voice. The voice is hard to hear, but you do something. You give me the text coming as like a text bubble right by him, and so I'm able to like catch what's going on. And with those like the wiggling animations and what he's saying, like I'm there in the world. Like I want to help him. I understand what I need to do to help him. I think there's a moment where he talks about our strength. And so, like, through what he says, you are, like, reinforcing and telling us more about why we're special and what we're doing. And so, really good choices there. He talks about getting to the button and, like, stopping the button. So there's a lot of, like, just in-the-moment storytelling. It's possibly there's a lot. Like, that robot says a lot at the beginning. Like, it's, like, text and text and text. But for the most part, I think it worked really well. If I were to iterate it, I might think about ways to trim that down, like just make it a little more direct. But there's always a balance between sort of character and story and clarity and getting the guest just to know what they need to do. Watching it, it looks like we're basically freeing his restraints. He's basically bolted down. And I guess from a story perspective, what is it we do? Do we melt them? Do we unscrew them? Like it was a little hard to tell. It was sort of like there was the pointers are there and there's a progress bar. What is happening to them?
So it's basically using the laser beam to melt the.
Gotcha. So those, and it's funny. We're in VR and like there is like this sort of metaphor of just having like pointers, and I didn't quite catch that we had lasers. And it was like a thing we did. And partly it was like, I think the robot talked to us as being strong. And I saw like the big pinchers. And like I'm building this idea in this world. And like, oh, we are going to use strength to get him out. But no, we're going to use lasers to get out, which is like really cool. But it was a little piece that I sort of missed. And actually, like if I were to do it, I would definitely get like a burning, like, oh, this is melting kind of feedback in there. But honestly, lasers is a really good choice. It's like when we're thinking about VR, things that are challenging is there's no real there, right? There's nothing to hold on to and touch. And lasers, in reality, you can't touch them. Like you can, like they can burn, but they are weightless and they are instantaneous. There's a lot of lovely things about lasers in VR. So really smart choice to make that the interaction point. I would just reinforce that. I'd be like, you are a laser robot. Like your special power is lasers everywhere, and like make that the way you do things, just to like bring that clarity. There's a little moment where the robot says, I think you successfully broke one of his restraints. And he said, you are my savior. And I was like, ooh, are we done? And the answer was no, there are more restraints. But I like the fact that you're giving this progressive feedback. That the character is telling us there's more to do. There's just a tiny little tweak. The character had dialogue which implied it was done, but it wasn't quite done. And that's what I would iterate. But I really like the fact that it was like you incorporated this progress into the world. Like, and you have a conveyor belt. The distance along the conveyor belt is the progress, the overall progress. The restraints with the robot is the progress for freeing that robot. And so you have this really great way of making progress a state in the world I can see. So instead of being like, oh, there's an overall like progress meter. Nope. Conveyor belt. Like, how close to the fire are we? Like, how many restraints do we have? There's a little bit of progress meter on the laser, which makes sense. I mean, if you were really pushing it, you could probably find a way to tell that story with like the restraint melting. But honestly, in 2 weeks, like UI, like just give me like, keep it simple. And that's a reality in fast build, right? Your goal is not perfect. Your goal isn't like this perfectly beautiful physics simulated space where we are really melting metal and we can sort of see the intricacies of the cut. It's like we've got to just get enough to make us feel like the world and what the world wants us to think and believe. And I think a lot of that's working. From an intrascript perspective, I think it's a lot of like good build, and then the ending is kind of sudden. And that's probably one of the things to like think about is there a way to bring in like a surprise, like a new escalation? Because in some sense, the world tells us what's going to happen, and then it happens. It's like, free my restraints and stop the conveyor belt, and then we'll succeed. And what happens? We free the restraints, stop the conveyor belt, and we succeed. Now, wonder is like, if I were to like add like that extra thing to this world, like what is now the new surprise? Like, oh, we're free? No, we're not. Like this robot like now comes into play, and we have to do something else. Obviously, a lot more work, but like looking at this world and like where I want to take it, that would be the thing to push. Like, how do you go from an intrascript sort of builds and builds and builds and gets to sort of the predictable ending, and bring in like a new element of surprise where we take what we know about the world. We're robots, we have these powers, we thought we were there, and the world says, nope, there's this new challenge, which in some sense is just a reflection of the old challenge. Can you now do this, solve this new problem? But in some sense, that's a testament to the world building. Like, you have a world where I can sort of imagine that and see that, and I can sort of imagine you as a team being like, oh, we understand these characters and this stuff, here's what we could do. And I would have a lot of confidence that you could take what you have and bring in that escalation.
Yeah, like even for me, even for me, like I had more ideas in my head based on what I was seeing that I was like, oh, wouldn't it be awesome if this happened? So for example, the guest has the agency to either like use the lasers to melt the restraints or like navigate to that button to like buy more time. There were some other robots in the environment, like there's a tall silver robot and then like another like smaller one. Like there's a part of me is like, wait, are they gonna come in the way next? Is there any collision detection? Like, so there's like many things you can do to make that journey back to like freeing the restraints even more exciting if you wanted. And then the other thing about collision detection, that the part where the robot that's restrained was turning the corner, like when you first went to try and melt use the lasers to melt the restraint, I thought you won't be able to because you're in some kind of casing, like right at the corner. So I was like, oh, maybe he's gonna have to go back again, buy some more time and like wait, but then it's gonna be too close. So those were the things that were playing on my mind that could have like really made it even more exciting to watch. And then there's one, which was to Dave's point about the interest curve. You could potentially try a dramatic scenario where the first time it starts, like let the robot just go and like get chewed up, and then like now this is what you have to prevent, or something like that. Maybe you have like a, multiple lines or something where you get the context very clearly up front as what you're trying to avoid. So that's just those are the thoughts.
Yeah, you could do stuff like there's a robot right at the end of the conveyor belt that gets scrapped at the beginning, so we sort of see that. A strategy often, and when thinking about a BVW world, is instead of thinking about how to add to it, imagine your world is the escalation. What could you sort of remove from the beginning or like fill in so that it starts smaller and builds to where you are? Like an example might be, basically the threat of destruction is really strong. What if like there was a first device and it was called like the arm crusher, and your first job was to free the robot's arms. And so you just get the arms free, and then it's able to survive the arm crusher because he pulls them in. And then you get to like the leg crusher, and you have to free the legs. And then the final thing is like the incinerator. And so you could sort of almost recognize that like you do have a strong ending, but because it's presented as just the only threat, then it becomes, you sort of like, we're looking for, then build from that. But you could reverse and say, what if we built to that? But again, all it's sort of like, you've got like such a strong like space you built in like these interactions that it's now a fun place to sort of be creative in, which is really a great place to get to by making stuff. So great choices, good stuff.
Team 4.
Left hand. All right. So walk over to that button.
Could you reset your position so you're...
Do that. All right. Big gray button says start. There's fruit. It's like
press the...
yeah. I got a sense that there's a start button here. Like a subtle, small start button. Do it.
My greatest chef, please protect my granddaughters and the family restaurant. I'm afraid they will fight over the restaurant after I'm gone. Especially Bonnie. Promise me, Poe. Protect them. Save our restaurant.
Save the restaurant.
We bring you news of the passing of Grandpa Bobbyhead, the owner of the highly regarded restaurant eatery. It is speculated that Robin, the younger granddaughter of Grandpa Bobbyhead, will inherit the restaurant as the new owner. While Grandpa Bobbyhead had 2 granddaughters, only Robin has shown true talent.
You! Impossible! I should be the one to inherit this restaurant.
Bonnie, what are you doing here?
You know why I'm here. This place is mine.
What? No, it's our family restaurant. He entrusted it to both of us.
Liar! Everyone knows you are the new owner.
No, please, protect us in our restaurant. We cannot be the one to end our family's restaurant.
It's mine.
Whoa. Wait, why are you doing it?
It's mine.
Alright, you have fruit.
It's mine.
Alright.
Please, Bonnie, let's talk.
I have nothing to say to you. This is ridiculous. The restaurant should be mine.
If you destroy the kitchen, there will be no restaurant.
Well, if I can have it, then you can add it. It's mine.
I'm wondering, is there more I should be doing?
Bonnie, this is not what Grandpa wanted. He wanted us to keep the family tradition together.
Then why everyone is talking like you are the new owner?
I don't know. All I know is that it's not true.
Whoa, okay, alright.
Look, Bonnie, look around you. This is our restaurant. We built it with our grandpa. He wanted us to both preserve the restaurant. Please believe me.
Is it true?
Yes, of course. All Grandpa wanted was for the family tradition to go on.
I'm so sorry. I just saw the news and...
It's okay, we can fix it together, yes?
Right. Well, man, the beginning of this was really nice. I think one of the things I like most about this is the sense of sort of like style and character you have with this. There's a very, I mean, we're thrown into a very dramatic situation, which is the grandfather's dying. I'm getting entrusted with sort of being the savior of the challenge here, and there's concern over the two daughters. And one of the things you really pull off is these two sisters being characters. And part of it was the early, like the scenes where they're basically arguing and setting it up. And I think the 2D style, like especially the sort of like the freeze frames on the sisters and their names, was just a very effective technique to pull in. And it really, really, like I think you're using color, you're using like one sister is scary, one sister is scared, and like in some sense, like by no means is it a realism in terms of like how scary she is and how sad she is. Like that one sister is just like absolutely terrified of her sister. The other one is like a terror. But that contrast really, really helps establish what's going on. And it feels like this world is less about a restaurant and a grandfather, and it's more about these two sisters. And like in the world, it really, like that becomes sort of apparent. And that the two sisters, like a lot of this, I mean, truthfully, I felt like I was just sort of like over here dealing with like the temper tantrum of the sister. Like I'm dealing with all the fruit while they're working it out. And like I feel like that's partially where this world is going. It's like, it is about the two sisters. And to that end, I did feel like secondary to this. I was like, sort of like, how am I helping? Like I'm here, and I sort of like feel sort of the awkwardness of, yep, I'm the chef. The family has a lot of drama, and here are the sisters. Like there's almost like an aspect of like, here we go again. And I am back in the kitchen dealing with Bonnie and the fruit. And so the question I was sort of working through was how, like basically I was wondering, am I doing a good job? And I was like, I think that if I were to like focus on the iteration, I would like wonder like, what is the guest doing? And how do you give them feedback that they're doing the right or wrong thing? And I guess I'm wondering, can I fail? Like, is my role, is there something I'm doing that if I don't do it well enough, bad things happen? Because I was like looking behind me, and there's like the wall of the kitchen, and there's like fruit sort of piling up around me. And I could definitely tell, like, there were some times where the fruit got cut in a way that was more satisfying, but the world wasn't really reacting to what I was doing beyond that. And I guess I'm wondering, does the world have consequence for what the guest does? Or is it just sort of in the interaction with the fruit?
We have two endings, so it depends on the cuts you have.
Oh. So that.
It depends on how many fruits you cut.
Okay. So and the cutting happens basically when they're in the air. Like, I didn't feel like I could cut them while they're on the table.
You can cut them on the table, but at very specific.
Okay. And like I said, that's the place where I would like look for iteration. It was like in the moment, I knew on like a sort of a sub goal level that my job was to like hit the fruit, because you sort of gave me a stick. I mean, at the end of the day, like a big bamboo stick isn't what I'd reach for to cut fruit. So there's a little bit of weirdness, like the bamboo stick is cutting the fruit, but I have a stick, fruit's coming at me, I'm gonna do something. So I get that, and it's a nice, engaging thing, like the sound effect and hitting it. But at the same time, the world says that the sisters are fighting and the future of the restaurant is in the balance. And I'm sort of wondering, how do I make progress on the problem of the world? And like, how does that connect? And there was definitely moments where I'm wondering, like, is there something I'm not doing that the world's waiting for me to do, and things like that? Because there's definitely not a lot of feedback on my role and all of that stuff. And like the world, I think that's, I mean, at the end of the day, like the sisters work it out, and it seems like, I think this is Robin, like she talks her sister down, and they work through it. And I think I wanted to be a little more involved in all that.
Yeah, I would say the leading image that you had next to the start button with the bamboo stick and the bunch of chopped veggies, like the expectation set up just with that screen is very high. Like in my head, I was like, right, like I guess it's not a knife, it might be a stick, but like there's going to be some kind of contest of like proving how to chop vegetables or something to like make sure you're the right owner of the restaurant or something like that. So I think you have a lot of power in that first image because that's the only thing separate from the start button. And then yeah, the second part was related to once you're in that room and you have a long stick in your hand, like it could go in multiple directions. I was like, am I supposed to go and like try and like beat the other bunny rabbit out of the room, or like I think those were the natural progressions that came to mind from seeing what agency was being provided. Yeah, so I think.
Yeah, and the thing, way I would look at it is, you have a lot of strength in these characters, so I think that's the last little piece, is how do you connect my character to their characters? And like I really like the fact that they are like arguing and talking through this, and the fact that the characters are living out this conversation and this fight, not just in the, like there's food being thrown, but they're talking through the legacy. And like that's where, if you could get it to like the magic of the guest is part of that and they help resolve that. It's a little interesting because you have a very character-driven world. Like it is fundamentally these two sisters and their fight, and they have to resolve it. And it puts into a question, like, what does the head chef of the restaurant have to do with that? And that would be, I think there's a story question there that would unlock the interaction. And that's definitely like, when we sort of talk about the balance of like story interaction, how do you make those two work together? And at the end of the day, I felt like I was successfully chopping fruit out of the sky with a bamboo stick, but I wasn't quite helping resolve the fight of the restaurant. And it could even be simple things like, the sister could be like, hey, look, like you're causing a big mess, and like the chef has, like Poe has been with us for so long, like you want to do this again. Like you could almost like just find ways to throw it to the character and recognize that the work I'm doing is, in some sense, it's exhausting, it's just frustrating. And I think that's places I might look, is like, how do you like use that character element? But like I said, the world is like interesting, and the characters are like legitimately compelling in the space you built it up to. I have questions about the local news and how much gossip and rumor they spread and how they tell this. But overall, it was fun to be in. I would just look for like, how do you connect the guest to that story you built there? So, good work.
All right, and team 2.
The bees, not the bees. I don't like them. These red flies are so huge.
there's less of them. We're driving them to extinction. We live!
Yay! No more.
Right. Wow. Interim, we had a very different looking world. Like the spirit, basically, I can tell the worlds are the same because I know what the world is. Like at the interim, you had like the kids and the paths, but now like the world is exploded in content and like filling out the space. And I think that's the first most noticeable thing is like you have a space. You have like a world which has characters, which has scenery, which is its own aesthetic, and like the storybook leading us in, like how it set it up, like a lot of this connects in a really strong way. I love the way the kids look. I love the way the insects look. There's a lot of like good craft there, and then the kids bring both like they have character in terms of, like they're afraid of things. The animation connects, and so a lot of that works really well. I will admit, I kind of have no idea, like what it would be like if I could play this. Like I'm watching it, it's like how the kids match to the insects and like how that all works is definitely super hard to like tell by watching it. And is there any hint besides the opening moment where they talk about what they're not afraid of or what they are afraid of? Yeah.
And also the color actually.
I was like watching. I was like trying to connect color, and so color connects to the.
Yeah.
So the lanternfly is afraid by the red shirt kid, and the bee is afraid by the yellow shirt kid, and also the spider is afraid by the purple.
Okay.
The most important instruction that when is the kids facing the kind of insect that it is like a trampoline. Trampling animation.
Okay, and so I'm watching. There's feedback on the if a insect is coming at a kid and they're afraid of it, they'll tremble.
Yes.
So,
okay.
That's gonna be the most front insect on that one.
Yeah, man. Okay, and this is man. Like we talked sort of interim. You guys have a super weird world. It just in the sense that the mechanic doesn't make a whole lot of sense for the world. Right? Like there is no world where like the kids are stuck and the insects come at them and move them around. But at the same time, like the logic of the world is there. Like we have that we're in the space, the kids are afraid of the insects, and we've got to protect them. We've got to move them around. And so like I think you're one click, like the mechanic is like one click, just too abstract for the story at the moment. Like I think if you know what you're doing, you can sort of make it work. But there's basically, when we sort of talk about weird in worlds, it's not a bad thing. Like, it's not bad to be weird. What it means is that it's work for the guest to catch up with that, to understand it. And so every weird thing has to be explained to the guest. And, I mean, like, watching this, and part of this is just watching it, it happens very fast. Like, it's sort of like, it takes a lot to, like, understand and take in. And so by me projecting as the guest, I'm like, okay, how do I know which kid to move? How do I know how to move? How do I know the consequences of that? And you've got like a lot of pieces of this that are working, like the little smiley face, a really good progress indicator. I'm getting a sense like if a child gets hit too many times, that goes down, right? They go from green to like yellow and all that stuff. So I get that. And I get the sense that I need to move them around. I got to sort of move them from lane to lane because these insects are coming. I got to like stop. I got to put the right child in front of the other thing. But my brain kind of gets like that. It feels like there's some learning there. It reminds me of, actually, I think it was Ferris's World last year, which was a beat matching game with rock, paper, scissors, and you had to like not match. You had to like do the thing that was the sort of like the thing that would defeat the thing. And it's just this level of cognitive load. So sort of like thinking about when people are playing things, how much their brain is working. And man, my brain was working overtime watching your world because I was trying to piece together which child goes with which insect. And I was doing that in the context of your world. I was like, oh, which insect is that child afraid of? And this is where you have a really ambitious way to make this work, which is if I'm working from just the mechanic, I'm expecting a matching world, where it's like, oh, like, match this to that and sort of like line them up. I'm also not like, you have an added thing of like moving the kids around like to make that match. So there's a layer of like just learning how those work that my brain is kind of working through. And I imagine once I get there, now I can sort of live and understand with the mechanic in a more intuitive space. But there is, I think, just layers of stuff for the guest to understand that would be a challenge. And if I were to iterate this, that's where I would focus, is how do you get the guest sort of like to work into that, to like understand those things. And it'd be a little of, I would probably emphasize the color more, like things you can do. Like so the kids are afraid of certain insects, right? So like for one child, they can deal with 2 insects, but one of the insects hurts them. Is that basically right? I would do things like they're wearing shirts. These kids wear shirts that say what they're afraid of. Like kid 1 is like, I hate spiders. Kid 2 is like, I hate lanternflies. And you're just looking for ways to sort of use the world to tell that story so that as I'm looking and learning it, I can sort of connect. But like I said, that's sort of where I'd push this because I really do love the space you've built. You've gone from something that felt kind of mechanical to now something that has character and has a place and a presence. And now I'm wondering, how do you basically get a guest into that space and then teach them these things to do such that they can really like work with it? And then what you can do is you can like play with it and mess with it, like bring in the interest curve of like, okay, you've done this, now do this. And I think that would sort of be the next steps for this world.
Yeah, I can, like just a quick comment for me is that not knowing what the context for the interim milestone that you guys had, this was definitely an experience where I was looking at the screen, like viewing what was in the world, and then trying to look at you as the guest to see what you were doing to try and like put the two together, which I didn't find myself like thinking about specifically in previous worlds. So it also like, it almost brings up there's the immersive experience, which is personal for the person inside the headset, and then there's the, lack of a better word, spectate mode where you're trying to figure out like what's the interaction that's causing things to change on screen. Because it was all happening very fast. Like the video was moving and insects were coming and children were getting swapped. So there's something cool about that. Like it actually, for me, splits there's the experience of the person that's actually doing it, and then there's the experience that people are actually seeing that person go through. So it's definitely a testament to what you guys have built.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times when you're working, then if you're designing for a naive guest, it's mostly about slowing things down. Like this world felt like if you know what you're doing, you're ready to jump in and engage with the world. But if you wanted to bring a guest in, you need to sort of like think about not where we're at in this world is like the end goal, and the beginning is, okay, one insect at a time, learning just that relationship, and then learning to move the kids. And so this would be a good example of the iteration would be removing things to like ease the guest in. And it feels like you're there because you have sort of like the end experience. Now it's like bringing the guest through that journey. But like I said, I really love where you ended up with the world and sort of like this combination of a really interesting, like believable world with admittedly a kind of an unusual mechanic that doesn't show up in this space. And I kind of want to try it. You've got a thing that makes me like. Do you want to try playing it? Well, we can do it after. We'll do it after class. So anyway, good work.
Thank you.
All right, that was team 2, which means that was all the worlds. So congratulations, everyone. Round 1. So yeah, I mean, I know, Arnab, there is something about BVW worlds that are a magical, beautiful thing. And this is a really solid crop of BVW worlds, which are these, they're not quite games, they're sort of games. They're experiences that you fit into this like relatively short time frame. And all these worlds, I think, express that in a really, really strong way. And actually, it gives me a lot of confidence for round 2, which we're going to talk about in just a second, because this means you all are probably ready for round 2 and for what that means. So let's do it. Let's talk about what's next. So you just finished. Yeah. So so you guys are done with round 1, which was really about getting used to being a team and working on pipeline and understanding what it takes to make something that's interactive. And as we were pressuring all of you, thinking about what if the team member wasn't the person in the headset? So round 2 is going to be that setup. And I'm going to wait just a little bit, like people are going to be coming down at 3. And some things to note, the format, this is very much the same. It is a 2-week assignment. So you'll have the same kind of pattern you had on round 1. And you'll be using the exact same technology with a twist. So with this, let me get it into a place where you can see it better. Put the summary aside. About right. That's good. And as a heads up, this should be on Canvas now, so all the stuff is there, ready to be read. So let's read through this. So it's going out today. Interim is due next Monday, so it'll be shown in class on Tuesday. So a 1-week checkpoint. The final world is due the following Monday. We're doing that the Tuesday afterward. And we are using Quest 2 using pass-through. So pass-through is the technology on the Quest. It has cameras. And pass-through lets you see what's around you while having the headset on your face. What that lets you do is let you do augmented reality. So this round, instead of just doing VR, you all are doing AR, which means when someone is in this world, they'll be standing up here, and they'll be able to look around, and they will see the room as part of what they can see. They will also see what your world is adding on top of that, into that. So you're going to be augmenting their experience. In years past, this was done with HoloLens, which had glasses, and you saw the room because you could see through the glasses. And so the trick was to project things basically onto like transparent screens from your eyes so the images appeared in the space. But Oculus, and this is, I would say, this is the direction a decent amount of AR is starting to go. Oculus is the same thing, headset, full, same field of view, uses the cameras to basically feed in reality. Now for Oculus Quest, it is a black and white space. It doesn't really have depth, so if I can see the image, I can sort of see the space, but there are some tricks and technology limitations about what you can and can't do. So you have the same sort of spatial tracking for the 3D space, but at the end of the day, the video feed is kind of a flat thing to work with. So some of the trick of this will be how do you mix those two together, both from a creative perspective, like what do you want to bring to reality? What kind of experience do you want to make happen? And then there's a technical challenge of what can Oculus do, what can the Quest do reasonably well? To that end, the TAs will be helping. There'll be a workshop today, Wednesday, tomorrow, to go through technology. But some of this will be, we talk about the marshmallow challenge and where is your marshmallow. There's a very good chance your marshmallow is augmented reality. Like what can it do versus what can't it do well? So a thing to consider is scope and how do you work with this technology, given that it's a little bit new. But the assignment, as you may have been reading and looking at this, has some challenges. The lecture last week about indirect control is going to become a very important lesson, because this assignment is the feeling of freedom naive guest. As it says here, your job is to create a consistent, highly interactive, and engaging experience that lets naive guests feel like they have a lot of freedom in the choices they make. So, despite that feeling of freedom, you must also ensure they have a very enjoyable time in the brief experience you provide for them. You may find that indirect control is a very useful way to make your world seem larger and richer than it really is. It is not necessarily that the experience continues to be engaging after multiple playthroughs. So we're talking about a single guest having basically a single playthrough, and in that playthrough, they have a good time, and they feel like they had a lot of freedom. So some things to consider: good interest curve, meaningful choices, surprises. We have the existing constraints: no shooting games, no pornography. And this is where it all comes together in the envelope. So what you'll be doing is not for interim, but for final. You will be writing down on a physical piece of paper your predictions of what our guest will do. When we talk about guest, for this round, we will have naive guests. So I will not be your guest. You will not be your guest. In fact, we don't know who your guests are at this moment. We will be recruiting naive guests. You will not know who your guests are until you come to class. The only things we guarantee are the guests are able to perform your worlds, that they will know English. So if you want to worry about a language, we'll talk about some of that stuff in a second. But there is no guarantee that they've done AR before. There's no guarantee that they play a lot of games. They may not. So you are working with a pretty big unknown when it comes to your guest. Our goal will also be to have multiple guests. So it won't be the case that we'll have one guest, and over the course of 14 worlds, they get really good for the last world. Don't worry. We're going to keep the guests as naive as possible as we do this. So they're not allowed to get good. But the whole art of this is being able to predict what the guests will do, while also having the guests feel like they had a lot of freedom. In some sense, it is a paradox. You want to have as much control as possible so you can predict what they'll do, but you also want them to have as much freedom as possible so they say they had a lot of freedom. Some things about the predictions. We are asking you to be bold in this. So there will be some interpretation. Some things that are good for being bold is order mattering, like predicting the first thing, the second thing, and the third thing. It is also good that the predictions kind of relate to the freedom. If it's kind of obvious, like watching the world, that the prediction was going to happen, like pretty much guaranteed. Like an example would be, there's a giant start button at the beginning and they push it. Like if there's nothing else to do, like sure, it's a good use of indirect control in terms of like goals and constraints. Like there's nothing else to do. But at the same time, it's not a terribly bold prediction. Yeah. So here's the deal. We're going to give them a brief tutorial on the technology. There is a strong reality with VR. Those controllers, even if you know what you're doing, are not very usable. Like conventions of grip and picking up, like my advice would be do not rely on what seem to be like gameplay conventions. Your goal is simplicity. So for instance, if you, for some reason, want the guest to pick things up, you might want to consider really carefully, is picking up an important thing. It's much easier just to say, attach the tool to their hand and never let them let go of it. Like, why not just give them a hammer for a hand instead of having them pick up a hammer and use it? So you want to be very thoughtful in your choices. Your goal is to have all the things the guest does be things that are essential to the experience. You want to avoid the little things in terms of interface and little steps that if you know what you're doing, you know to do it, because you have a guest who's going to be learning this all for the first time. Now, some things to do. We're going to ask you to test this. we're asking you to do playtesting. So on a very simple math level, the assignment is basically asking you to playtest it at least 8 times. You're going to submit evidence that you tested it. You're going to submit basically names and dates that this is what and when you did it. So we call it a testimonial. If you want, we'll talk about guest testing this Thursday. If you want to submit like surveys and questionnaires, feel free. But we're basically looking for evidence of the testers, who they are, and how you tested. And a thing that's worth calling out before we get to the next part is, let's see where, I'm trying to like look ahead to this. We have a sort of a little piece of constraint here, which we're going to hold you to pretty explicitly, which is this one. You're going to welcome the guests into the world and wish them luck. The world itself cannot tell them what to do. So instructions on how to use the buttons, instructions on how to move, instructions on like how to interact, not allowed. Your world needs to be something that the guests can step into, know what to do, have confidence in what they're doing, feel like they have freedom, and achieve the goals of the world, have fun, and do it all in a way that your predictions come true. So, easy. Because I guess I think will be important. For interim, we're going to ask that you submit an interaction map, which is basically a design document that talks through what you are going to do, because we know at interim you want everything built. So we're going to ask you to have basically a plan in place for how do you expect to get your guests to do all this stuff. So we can talk about some of your strategies. Yeah.
I'm noticing you're not talking about golden spike.
Yep. There's no goal spike for this. Yeah. You should do it as a team. You should like sync up and make sure you're doing stuff. But the things you're turning in are just interim and final. And actually looking at the grading, what you're going to be submitting is the basic world, and for interim, you're submitting the interaction map, which I'll show examples in a second. And then final, you are submitting your predictions. They'll be written, handed in class, in person, and you'll be submitting guest testing, basically the evidence that you tested it. So really quickly, I think the best way to do this might be Canvas. This. So interaction maps are just a way to like think about what you're planning, and these are examples of this. So this is a storyboard example. This is a team that was using the idea of you being wind to sort of like help guide a ship through the seas. And this is a storyboard where they sort of show the sequence of stuff happening, and it's talking about what the guest is doing, sort of what it achieves in the world, and why they're doing it. And the fundamental thing we're looking for in the interaction map is basically what is the guest doing and why are they doing it. And so that connection of basically cause, like why is something happening, and effect, what are they doing, is the core of what we're asking for. So this one right here, it's a little hard to see, but the first little bit they talk about is the guests will start blowing into the mic because the crew and captain are complaining about the lack of wind, and they started praying to the god of wind. So the guest needs to like pick up on the idea that they are the god of wind, and they start blowing into the microphone. Heads up, this was an interaction map for BVW Remote. And so the platform was microphone. It was exciting. Other examples, this is much more of a flowchart, which is a fine way to think about it. And so this one, it talks about the guest will read the title, watch the cutscene. And there's a little split here. Like, if they just figure out how to move with the joystick, then they go over here quickly. It's like, if they figure it out, good, the world gets going. But they might not know what they're doing, not figure things out at all, and then notice the joystick and start using it. And so there's a little bit of like, are they confused? Do they notice something? So this is what we're looking for. It's like you're able to sort of like think about your guest and get into their head and kind of understand, why are they successful? Why are they confused? And in fact, that might be a lot of what you work on, is predicting where the guest gets confused and then giving them the help they need. So these are just, see, a few more, just to give you a sense of the variety. Another flow chart, a much simpler one. Like nothing too, like the interaction map doesn't have to be very complicated. So this is, the guest enters the world, and it's like immediately, there's food being thrown at the guest has a stick in their hand. Basically, the only thing they can do is stab the food. So the guest will stab the food. And then there's an idea that the stick has a certain length, the food gets stuck on the stick, so the guest has a sense of progress, and they will know that once it's full, they've completed it. And then the guest will be curious about like what happens to things, and so the guest will stab inedible things out of curiosity. And so it's just all about, like I said, getting into the head of the guest and talking about what they'll do and how you'll guide that process. Within this, like I said, you'll be doing the playtesting. The TAs are going to help organize some of this. So we encourage you as a team to like think about how to find guests, how to test a variety. Heads up, a lot of people in the building are actually pretty good at BVW worlds, and they might give you a false sense of confidence. So as a team, think about if you can find people who are less experienced at identifying interface and goals and things like that. That said, it is a great start to play tests with anyone you can find. A lot of the things that are a problem are not at all related to the guest experience, but a lot more related to your world. We'll talk about that on Thursday. But what people can pick up on, there's a lot you can do to like refine that, even just by playtesting with your team and things like that. Let's see. Yeah, so understanding that you can't give any instructions, your idea is probably an important thing to consider. The more you can pick things that are intuitive, that when you just tell the guest what the world is, they get it, the more likely your world will see success. A note, so on Thursday when Jesse talked about indirect control, and then at the end we watched videos, those were all round 2 videos. All of those worlds were built and designed under these constraints. If you think about the world with the paper airplane, like the idea of what to do, like there was no words, there were no instructions. It was just, you know, there's feedback on what happens and encouragement of what to do. Where to go was all inferred from the world. And so those are the things to be thinking about. So this assignment becomes more difficult depending on the type of idea you choose. Yeah. Yeah, so there's the truth of no instructions, like in some places is really clear. Like if you have a big screen that says push A to do this, that's clearly explicit instructions. The spirit of this is if the world like gives me goals and like says like, hey, you know, come help me. That doesn't count as instructions for walk over to the person. Now, if you have them be like, hey, come help me, and the world says, use the thumbstick to walk over to the person, now we're in the space of instructions. And so things to be paying attention to, if you're using words, be thoughtful about your words. For the most part, no words puts us into a place where the instructions are probably a lot less explicit. But for the most part, we want the worlds to exist in their own reality. We don't want you talking about interface. We don't want you talking about the controllers. We don't want you talking about sort of what the guest is doing in the real world. We want the world to be like, hey, this is the problem we have. Come help us. And we want you to give the guest tools that they understand how to use those tools to help solve the problem. And like I said, the ideas you pick are going to really change how this works. One thing to recognize, this is a very artificial way to design an experience. If you think about games, like we teach people a ton about how to play a game, how to get better, how to iterate. So this is a challenge of like, you have a short experience. You don't have a long tutorial. You don't have like 100 hours of gameplay you're aiming for. The one place that like, this really shows up a lot, if you think about like Disney World and theme parks, like how do you get a guest who really isn't there to learn things, to step into a world, step into a fantasy, step into an interactive experience, and without sort of having this sort of fantasy breaking moment of like, oh, by the way, the button you have does this. No, the world just works for the guest. And that's kind of what we're looking for. We're looking for a world that just works. So that is a lot of what the design challenge you're faced with for this round is. You see a reflection of the interface? I would say it's on the safe side of no instruction. Basically, a strategy that you can use that's used a lot is having other characters show the guest, like basically flap your arms, and you have a character here flapping their arms. And you could do things like, and like I said, where this is especially good, and I think the airplane world is walking a line where they sort of talk about, they acknowledge the reality of a hand, in like put your hand here, which is a little outside the fantasy of the world. And I would push you to be a little less explicit than that, but that's in a gray space that's probably going to be mostly okay. And that will be a lot of the discussions. This is a place where I highly encourage you to come, like, schedule office hours, talk things through, talk with the TAs. This assignment is very difficult. And so the playtesting and iteration will be very important. I think the upfront creative process of like what would work, I highly encourage, before you build things, to prototype by acting things out. Like a really good strategy here is we have VR. And the nice thing about VR is the way we experience it is our body is sort of the controller. We move, we do things, we gesture, we reach, we grab, we look. And if you're talking through ideas, stand up and try them. Why would you do that? Like, what is it like, are there different ways to gesture? Like, if you're talking about actions and verbs that the guests can do, like, try it. If you're talking about dance, what does it mean to dance? The more you can get clarity of what your idea is in terms of like what the guest does and how that translates into something they really do, the stronger you will be for doing this. And the thing to watch out for are ideas that are hard to turn into action. A lot of times when we talk about this, we talk about verbs. And verbs are the things the guest does in the world. And there are verbs that are easy to do. Like a lot of times in VR, hit is an easy verb. But make is a really difficult verb. So watch out in your brainstorming for actions that are easy to say, easy to imagine, but are possibly really hard to do in VR. And the trick of BVW isn't like there are good ideas and bad ideas. The trick is there are some ideas that can fit into 2 weeks, and there are some ideas that are 4-week ideas, some ideas that are 6-week ideas. And so you're looking for the stuff that is sort of like simple and streamlined for all this. All right, that's a lot to talk about this. On the Canvas page, there are links to BVW worlds to look at, round 2 videos, all that stuff. But for now, we talk about some TA business. I guess before we move on to that, any questions about round 2? Yeah. Oh yeah, we'll be getting to that. Yeah. Yeah, so the TAs will be doing pass-through stuff tomorrow, and we'll also be looking at some pass-through examples on Thursday. So, yeah. Oh, you want to decorate the space? Yes. The challenge is, so your worlds will be performed down here, this space. So if you do want to augment that. Be thoughtful, talk to the TAs. We do have stuff in the prop room that might be usable. You might want a table, things like that. Coordinate with the TAs. We can make that work. We'll talk with the TAs. We can sort of negotiate like a fixed space. Basically, a space that fits comfortably down here is what we'll be mostly working with. But testing will be fairly important to like ensure consistency. You may want to be thoughtful about a more controlled, smaller space might be a better route to go than a bigger, more ambitious space. Cool. Like I said, Thursday we'll talk a lot more about all this. So this is mostly getting the assignment out there, getting you ready for all that stuff.
Cool. Oh, wait, this is not the first slide. There we go. All right. This clicker isn't on, is it? Cool. Cool. All right. Hello. Congratulations on round 1. Yay! All right. So we just have a few quick reminders from things that we noticed this round for you guys. First of all, please name your builds with your team number, because it makes our lives a lot easier when we're trying to pull them up and get them ready for when you guys present for both interims and finals. So please especially make sure that your team number is where your company name should be in your Unity project. Secondly, please keep your Perforce clean, and specifically your final and interim folder. Your interim folder should have your build and anything else that's like submitted for interim. So in this case, it would be your interaction, flowchart, storyboard, whatever you're making. And for your final, you should have one build, your references sheet, video, and then specifically for this round, you'll have your evidence of playtesting. Finally, or not finally, but next, submit videos. We really cannot grade if we can't see what your world is, and having a video is better than nothing if something happens to your world. So please make sure you get those in on time with your build. Next, reach out to us if you're having any problems. The TAs are here to help you, both with tech problems, with art questions, with sound design questions, but also with team conflicts and if you're feeling super stressed. If you are having trouble like going home at night and sleeping because you're here working all the time, that's not healthy, and we want to work with you to figure out how to make that better. Next, the deadline is final. If you submit something after the deadline, we will not show it. Please don't beg us to, it's not going to happen. These are kind of soft reminders for you guys in problems that we noticed this round. First of all, plan for sound early. Sound assets often kind of get pushed to the back, and we'll be like, oh, we'll just put those in at the end, it'll be fine. And then it messes things up, or you don't have time to figure out the timing on all that. So make sure you get those in and plan for them early. You guys are all a team. Please act like it. Work together, check in with each other. And you're graded as a team, so it really doesn't help anyone if you're at each other's throats, because you're all going to get the same grade and you're all making the same project. And we really want to make that project as best as possible. Next, manage your scope. A lot of you guys did a really, really great job cutting back on your scope between interim and final, so keep doing that. We're really happy with the worlds that we saw today. And finally, check Canvas, especially for things like retrospectives, your reflections, team feedback. All of those assignments are going to be on Canvas. Make sure you get them in on time, because that helps us out a lot too. And then workshops. This week's workshops are all in the workshop schedule doc that is shared with all of you. Tonight, team retrospectives. They will be from 5 to 6:20 p.m. I hope all of you saw my email yesterday about what slot you are, where you're going, and which TAs you're going to be meeting with. And then for programming workshops, we have the pass-through workshop. That's going to be tomorrow. We also have a Unity Animator workshop on Thursday. For art, we have an introduction to ZBrush, and we also have lighting in Unity, which Joy is working on. For sound, Christian will be having a sound feedback session tomorrow as well, similar to last week. And then we'll have an instrumentation and looping music workshop on Thursday. Nolan and Luca are working on an audio Unity pipeline video, which I don't know, it's recorded, right? Yeah, so that'll be up soon. And then everybody should have retrospectives, so I think we're good there. Yeah, Ferris.
Cool. Thanks.
Hey everybody, I only have actually one announcement. So we've started receiving these like Wi-Fi hotspot dongles, which essentially means that we will be able to support the capacity for you to do AirLink when developing the bullpen, so you won't have to develop with cables. We are still sorting out the numbers of those, and sort of the checkout system is going to be based around how many we actually have and we can give to you guys. But just for more information on that, that will be coming soon. And also installation for how to like get that information for how to install it as well. So something to look forward to. That's it.
Cool. That's all we've got for TA stuff. Like I said, please feel free to reach out if you have any questions or any, concerns.
And there was a question about teams.
Yes, right.
The teams are going out tomorrow morning.
Take a break, please. Go home and sleep.
So yeah. So today is about like celebrating the victory of completing your worlds, talking about them in the retrospective sessions, and if you want, letting your brain just think about stuff. But yeah, the assignment doesn't really start until tomorrow. And Thursday we'll be talking about playtesting and feeling of freedom, and so we'll be talking about worlds and just tips and tricks for how to navigate that. So yeah, today, like I said, and I think Lori was right, like the worlds you guys all made are fantastic. So you should all feel like really proud, not only of what you made, but of how you made it. It's possible this is the first time you've made like a project like this on a team where you couldn't do the stuff someone else was doing. And this class is about reflecting on that and recognizing what teamwork really means. So yeah, congratulations on like a crazy 2 weeks and getting stuff done that was kind of amazing. So reflect on it, get some sleep, and tomorrow and Thursday, we think in round 2, feeling your freedom and naive guess. Yeah.
So do we need to check out our alternate devices today?
We're going to be, for checking out stuff, we're going to be doing, I think they get checked back in and then checked back out. So we'll be doing that stuff. The check-in is today, effectively. Or has it already happened? Yeah, we'll have details. But yeah, basically, tomorrow is when stuff sort of gets started. So today, enjoy it as much as you can. Anything else? All right, good work, everyone.